Welcome to the show, everyone. I'm your host, Chris, and today we have a really special guest, Robbie McCarty, the owner of Patriot Crawl Space Repairs. We're going to chat about his journey, what the company does, and give everyone listening a great sense of what they're all about. So let's dive in. Thanks for being here, Robbie.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely, Robbie. It's a pleasure to have you. All right, let's dive into our first question and get this conversation rolling.
Perfect.
So, Robbie, let's start off by talking a little bit about your background. Tell us how you got into the crawl space repair business and what inspired you to start Patriot Crawl Space Repairs.
Yeah, so basically growing up, I was always around construction and blue collar type of people. My father owned an auto repair shop, still does. So he's owned it for 55 or so years. And he was into some apartment building and real estate investing as well on the side. His friends were mostly like construction people. I was always around real estate investing and building. And then in high school, I went to actually work for one of his friends who was a foundation repair contractor. And that was back in 1996. So I worked, as a laborer for them for $6 an hour all summer, my junior year of high school, I think it was. And kind of learned a little bit about the foundation business. Through college, worked for another concrete company. I went to college at Radford University and graduated from there, went into real estate and sold houses for a while, then got into house flipping and a little bit of new construction building. And during COVID, after I had married my wife and we had a very young child, the real estate business got extremely rocky, especially the flipping and home building business, because labor prices doubled during that time. Interest rates more than doubled. So we were just getting squeezed in all directions, and it got really hard to make money doing that. So we saw the writing on the wall and knew that we needed to get into another type of business. So one morning, I woke up on a Sunday, I think it was, and I told her we need to start a different business. I think we need to start a structural repair and foundation company. And she said, "Well, when do you want to do that?" And I said, "Monday." So that Monday, we started calling real estate people, realtors, everybody we could think of, looking for potential business in crawl spaces. We named it Patriot Crawl Space Repairs right off the bat. And by the second week, we were busy, and ever since then, we haven't missed any work, and we've thankfully been busy since we started going on 3 years ago.
Wow, that's a really incredible journey, Robbie. Yeah, it's definitely quite the story. It's amazing how you just jumped right in and turned that vision into a thriving business so quickly. And it's really cool to see how that background of real estate construction kind of came full circle. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
So, Robbie, let's dive into a little bit about how Patriot Crawl Space Repairs really sets itself apart. What would you say is the main thing that makes your company special or unique compared to others in the field?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. I think what sets Patriot Crawl Space Repairs apart from some of our competitors really starts with our employees. Number one, we pay our employees a lot more than our competitors. Most of them pay in the $22 an hour range. We pay our crawl space technicians $40 per hour. That was something I started from day one, because I knew that from me personally working in the crawl space and being the main technician, how hard it is and how much heart and really wanting to get the job done quickly and correctly plays a part in the outcome. And I knew that if someone wasn't giving 110% under the home, then the work just wouldn't get done quickly, and it probably wouldn't get done correctly. So it was just sort of my intuition that hey, to get this done well and to have a thriving business, we need to pay people so that they can have a great life, live in a good home in a decent school district, support their family. So I knew that we just wouldn't get the quality of work if we didn't do that. And my instinct was that if we paid more, then they would get work done faster, better, and we would actually be more profitable instead of less profitable. So that was just kind of a risk I took, and it paid off. We actually are very profitable. Our ratios of labor to revenue are spot on where they should be. And, the work quality is awesome. So it ended up paying off, and it's great for the guys because for the first time in their lives, they have a career that they're really proud of and they can actually support their families versus essentially being in poverty, working for some of the companies they were previously working for. So that is a big thing that sets us apart from our competitors. The second thing I would say is that myself and my wife are still heavily involved in the business, and I'm the actual Class A contractor. So we're involved in every single project. I may not be doing all of the work for the project, but I originate the inspection, talk with the person about the quote and what type of work we're recommending. My wife does the customer service and manages a lot of the back office. So I think just the quality is a little higher than companies where the owner may be a little more removed from the business, or they may be more of a national franchise brand. And then the third thing would be that we don't employ commissioned sales inspectors. So most of our competition, the way they're set up is they have inspectors that aren't really inspectors. They're commissioned salespeople, and they are paid on 100% commission. So they're paid a commission on whatever work or products they sell as a result of that inspection, and that's their incentive. These companies have sales meetings. They tell them what to push. They tell them push more of this, less of that, just based on pricing and kind of current business load. So it's conflict of interest, whereas our inspectors are paid per inspection. They don't get a penny more or less whether you hire us or not. They are solely at the home to do an inspection, just like a home inspector would be. So you don't get that profit motive from the actual inspectors that are identifying the issues. And to be honest, our inspectors don't really even know what we charge or what our pricing is. Again, they're solely there to do an inspection of the crawl space or of the part of the structure that the homeowner's concerned about. And then what happens is they send that inspection report to me, and I go over recommendations and pricing with the owner. So again, at that inspection, you don't have that sales incentive or pushy sales pitch. So I think those are the three things that really differentiate us as a company. One, we have better quality, more motivated, higher paid employees. Number two, the owners are directly involved on a day-to-day basis. And number three, we don't have a commission motive when you call us out for an inspection. So that'd be about it.
Yeah, that really makes a lot of sense. And it's a way of taking care of your team and making sure the quality is there from the ground up. And that definitely sets you apart. So thanks for sharing that. And let's keep going with the next question.
Yep, sure.
Absolutely, Robbie. So the next thing I'm curious about is how you've seen the business evolve over the last few years. You mentioned you started it about 3 years ago. How have things changed or grown since you first launched, and what are some of the biggest milestones you've hit?
Yeah. So when we launched the business, my wife April was in the office, cold calling real estate agents looking for underhome repairs associated with sales and inspections. I was doing all the inspections and I was doing all the work. I had a gentleman that was older than me, in his 50s, helping me a little bit, but basically he would be outside of the crawl space and just pass stuff in to me, and I was doing all of the work under the home myself, and then also doing inspections during evenings and weekends. So it was really tough. Then about 6 months in, we hired James, who was our first actual crawl space technician. So for a little while, 3 or 4 months, it was just me and him. I was still doing all of the inspections. We hired another guy and another guy. So after about the first year, I was out of the crawl space. Then for about 18 months, I did all of the inspections. So I was doing, maybe 12 to 15 inspections per week while they were doing work. And now we're at a point where I manage the quoting and the work in the office, and we have inspectors, and then we have a work crew. So which sounds like I'm more hands off, but it's actually, I think, better and more efficient because each person can focus on the job at hand versus me trying to kind of run the business from the road or from the crawl space. So I think now we're in a great spot in terms of the structure of the business and being able to offer the best product to the client.
Yeah, that makes total sense, Robbie. It sounds like you really evolved from wearing all the hats yourself to building a team where everyone can focus on what they do best. And that definitely makes things more efficient and helps you deliver a great service. It's great to hear how everything evolved evolved and how you all have grown. So let's keep going. It's been a really interesting journey so far. Oh, Robbie, the next thing I'd love to hear about is maybe a memorable project or a success story that really stands out to you. Maybe something that really shows what your team is capable of and that you're particularly proud of.
Yeah, there's in terms of our team, probably the most memorable project was in Suffolk. It was about a 3,400 square foot ranch home. So the size of the crawl space is the entire home. And pretty much all of the floor joists under this home were rotted from years of moisture issues. So basically we had to sister every joist in the crawl space. The girder beams were of such that they wouldn't accommodate our new joists just the way they were structured. So we had to put steel beams running down each side of the center of the home. So about 20 some steel beam sections, 40 steel jacks with 18-inch deep piers dug down, and it was about 120 floor joists. We also dug a perimeter drain system around the entire inside of that crawl space, put 2 sump pumps in, encapsulated it, put a dehumidifier in. So we also replumbed the entire water line system of the home. So we did a full water supply repipe, which was about a 3.5 day project. This was a major undertaking, and honestly, at the time, it was the biggest project we'd done. I mean, it may be as big as projects get in the Hampton Roads area as far as the crawl space is concerned. We pretty much did everything to the underside of the home, and it turned out awesome. The owner is actually an engineer, a Nobel Prize winning engineer, so a pretty smart guy. And, it was one where we had to step up and perform, and the client knew whether that work was done right or not, which doesn't, affect our work ethic, but it definitely increases the pressure. There wasn't any room for error, and the client was super happy. He said that when we were done, his floors felt like he was walking on the deck of an aircraft carrier. So, we were proud of it. I was proud of the team, but that's probably when we talk about big, memorable projects, that one definitely comes to mind and sticks out.
Wow, that is an incredible project, and it definitely sounds like a massive undertaking. I can imagine how much pride your team must have felt, that detail oriented. So that definitely shows what you guys are capable of, and it's a great story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. That was a fantastic story, and it's awesome to hear about that kind of accomplishment. So let's keep the momentum going and jump right into the next question.
Okay.
So you told us a lot about your journey and your team. Now I'm curious, what do you see for the future of Patriot Crawl Space Repairs? Any exciting plans or goals that you have in mind for the next few years?
So for the future of Patriot Crawl Space Repairs, we really want to be a regional, comprehensive crawl space repair and renovation company. And the reason that's our goal is because the crawl space is the most underserved yet most important section of the home. Everything meets up under there: your plumbing and drain systems, uh, your heat and air, ductwork, the structure of the home, the foundation. There's a lot of moisture issues. That's where mold can originate from if it becomes an issue. So the kind of health of the home originates from there. And it happens to be the part of the home that is the hardest work, and most contractors and repair people really don't want to do it. So for instance, heat and air companies that specialize in mechanical want to sell new heat and air units. They don't want to go under the house and repair or replace ductwork. Plumbers want to make small repairs. They don't want to do repipes for drain lines and water lines where the home is 70 years old and it's just due for new pipes, and it's creating a health issue. General contractors don't want to do crawl space cleanouts and mold removal and floor joist repair because it's super hard work and it's acquired skill. So basically, we see it as the most vital yet underserved market in the Southeast region, where humidity is a major issue. And we want to take on that task and basically see ourselves as a conduit for preserving homes and structures in the Southeastern United States.
That's a really inspiring vision, right? It makes a lot of sense that you're focusing on such a crucial and often overlooked area of the home. It's clear we're filling the gap that other contractors might not want to tackle and doing it in a way that really benefits homeowners. It sounds like you got some great plans ahead.
Yep.
Absolutely. It's really exciting to hear how you're carving out that niche and making such a difference. So let's keep on with the conversation. This is really great stuff.
Sure.
So, Robbie, I'm curious, what advice would you give to homeowners who might not even realize they have crawl space issues? What should they be looking out for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, homeowners that have a crawl space, honestly, I mean, it's a shameless plug, but they should give us a call if they haven't had it inspected recently and get somebody to take a comprehensive look at the ductwork, the plumbing, and the moisture and make sure there's no mold under the home. But some things they could look out for would be super old ductwork. So if they know that their ductwork is 50 years old, it's time to replace it. That's going to be the biggest health issue under the home. Secondly, would be 50 to 70-year-old plumbing lines and water lines. A lot of times those are corroded on the inside, and that's affecting the water that you drink and bathe in. And then thirdly would be mold and moisture issues. So if you have a vented crawl space, and you're in the Southeast, which if you're in Hampton Roads, then you're going to have moist crawl space in the summer if it's not sealed up. Then you want to look at getting it sealed up or at least a partial encapsulation so that the hot summer humid air isn't wreaking havoc on the bottom of the home and all of the systems in the crawl space.
Yeah. That's fantastic advice. It really sounds like those older systems and that moisture control piece are huge things to look out for. And it definitely makes sense to get a professional like you guys in there to really take a look if they haven't had it checked in a while. That's super helpful. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
So, Robbie, I'm curious, what do you personally find the most rewarding part of running this business?
Yeah, so the most rewarding part I would say of running the business, really twofold, the employees and the customers. So seeing our employees happy, moving up, getting promotions, making enough money to provide for their family, telling me things like their family just had the best Christmas they've ever had, is really fulfilling. And then also clients seeing how grateful they are when they know that somebody did what they said they were going to do, took a big issue under their home that they were super nervous about and knocked it out of the park, did an awesome job and just followed through and delivered. So the reactions and gratitude from our employees and customers, it gives us purpose in life, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's really wonderful, Robbie. It's clear that you're making a big impact, not just on your customers' lives, but also on your team. And that's got to be incredibly fulfilling. So it's great to hear that that's what drives you and gives you purpose.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, we're not saving the world or anything, but just based on our skill levels and kind of what our path has been in life, this feels like the best impact we can have, and we're not doing something that is necessarily the most fun thing in the world to do. We're doing what's needed the most and what other people don't want to do. So that kind of brings.
Absolutely. And that makes perfect sense. Sometimes the most rewarding work is just doing what's really needed and making a difference in the way that fits your skills and your path. So it's awesome to hear how you found that sweet spot and how it brings you joy. Thanks for sharing that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Robbie, I'm curious, what do you think are some common misconceptions people have about crawl space repair that you like to clear up?
Yeah, so a few misconceptions would be the idea that a piece of plastic or vapor barrier is going to help with crawl space moisture. That's really not how moisture works. Moisture mainly comes in through the vents and is carried in the air and then condensates on the surfaces under the home. So it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the plastic or what people call a vapor barrier. It has to do with air intrusion. Also, the idea that if things are out of sight, then they're out of mind. When in reality, the ductwork that carries the air that everyone in the home breathes and the pipes that carry the water that everyone drinks and bathes in are under the home. So, if the ductwork's 50 years old or the pipes are 70 years old or more, it's probably time to look at replacement, probably past time to look at replacement. So, people thinking that what they can't see won't hurt them when in reality, what's going on under the home is probably has the biggest impact on the health of the occupants of the home and your family. So I think those are the biggest misconceptions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And those are really important points. It's definitely eye opening to realize that just because it's out of sight doesn't mean it's not having a huge impact on your home's health. So, pointing out those misconceptions is really valuable. And thanks for sharing that.
Yep, absolutely.
So, for the next question, I'm curious, is there any piece of advice that you would give to someone Maybe thinking about starting their own business in a similar field?
Man. Yeah. So, one thing I would tell people is that starting and running a business is not the same as a trade. So, you have to be really good at the trade and know how to control quality. But when it comes to running a business, you have to understand marketing, lead generation, the numbers. So, you have to understand cash flow, profit margins, how to calculate pricing correctly, how to pay employees. There's so many skills that come into play that you really have to take a look at everything that's going to be needed and required of you as a business owner to correctly run that business, and then ask, is it really worth it? Or if you're a good technician, should you maximize your income as a technician or a salesperson or inspector or a manager? Honestly, in most cases, people, I think, can maximize income working for a company in a vital role. Honestly, my wife and I look at entrepreneurship as kind of something that was just handed down to us through our families. And it's not necessarily um, a gift for our enjoyment. It's more so a gift and an obligation. So I think God puts certain people in certain positions, tasks them with certain responsibilities that are needed for the greater good. And entrepreneurship, from my experience, is probably one of those things. So there's not a lot of glory in it. There's a lot of long hours. There's not as much profit and income as people think there is. So it's really kind of a duty when you get down to it. And I'm sure maybe as we get older, we'll get a few benefits from it. But for at least the first 20 years of my journey, it has been hard work, a grind, and just a hardcore duty that I was tasked with.
Yeah, that's really honest advice, Robbie, and I think is super valuable. It's clear that entrepreneurship is definitely a calling and a responsibility and not just a path to instant glory. So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's great things. It's gratifying. So if you're looking at it as a way to be of service, then I would say do it. And if you have to be all in. If you're looking at it as a way to just make as much money and have as much fun as possible, then you're going to be sadly mistaken. And yeah, you will be able to have fun down the line. I see people that do have a lot of fun, and there are some fringe benefits, but the work far outweighs the fun.
Yeah, that's a really grounded perspective. And I think it's super helpful for anyone listening. If you come into it with that mindset of service, like you said, then it's definitely worth it. But if you're looking for just a quick, easy ride, it's probably not the right path. So thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So for the next question, let's dive into maybe one piece of advice you give homeowners to maintain their crawl space in between professional inspections.
Yeah, so to maintain the crawl space in between inspections, you should have some type of moisture control in place, which would consist of having sealed vents, either a dehumidifier or some type of conditioned air going to the crawl space, a moisture barrier on the ground, and maybe peek in there every couple of months just to make sure there's no leaks or signs of rodents, that type of thing, and get it inspected, every 6 to 12 months would be my advice.
Yeah, that's perfect advice. Just a little bit, you said, just speaking in there every few months can help homeowners catch any issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Robbie, for the next question, let's talk about maybe a piece of feedback you received from a customer or an employee that really stuck with you, something that made you feel, yeah, we're doing the right thing here.
Man, yeah, so it happens, every couple days we get awesome feedback and reviews. Our customers have been really gracious and giving us positive reviews. I think whenever we get something like a handwritten note thanking us, that has a big impact. But yeah, I mean, honestly, every week we're getting reviews that make me really proud, and we're thankful for clients giving us that feedback.
Yeah, that's really wonderful to hear. And it's definitely a testament to the kind of work you guys are doing. Those handwritten notes and heartfelt reviews really do make all the difference. It's awesome that you get that kind of feedback so regularly and that it keeps you motivated. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's the next question for you, Robbie. What do you find is the most common challenge that homeowners have when they first reach out to you, and how do you help them overcome it?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think the two challenges are there's a lot of misinformation from contractors, other tradespeople, and even people in the crawl space industry. So a lot of times, either from other people or from the internet, they kind of get down the wrong road. in terms of trying to pre-diagnose what they need. And crawl space science is a newer science. So, there's not a lot of people that are very good at really knowing what the cause and effects are under the home and what the remedies are. So that's one issue. And then the second issue is just that it's expensive. I mean, with labor, what it is nowadays, and materials are high, getting work done under the home is probably one of the most expensive things a homeowner can do because it requires a lot of labor and materials. So I think those are the two challenges, is just getting bad advice and that it's expensive. So that's a big hurdle as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I can see how those would be big hurdles for homeowners. Just read the training would have guide them through that, especially when they might have the wrong info or just be worried about costs. So thanks for breaking that down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about how you see the industry evolving. Where do you think crawl space repair is headed in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a good question. I think the industry's in a little bit of a lull. A lot of the companies that started it, are the owners have gotten older. A lot of them have recently sold their companies. So you have big Wall Street firms or private equity firms that are buying some of these companies and aren't managing them very well, to be frank. So I think there's a few leaders out there that are kind of in our age group. We'll see what happens in terms of them expanding their companies. You have some people in the Carolinas, down south, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, where you have some decent younger leadership in companies. But I think either a group of us or even our company individually is going to really expand this industry to where it's comprehensive. These companies are going to be doing moisture control, foundation repair, ductwork, and plumbing under the homes. Really systematize it to where it's all one system versus each trade that goes under there not wanting to touch or mention the other things that are wrong, because the stuff under the home kind of all works together. So you need that crawl space trade or crawl space sector to kind of be all encompassing. So I think that's what you'll see going forward over the next 10 years. We hope to be one of the leaders in that regard. And I think you'll see some of these companies, whether it be ours or some of our peers, get pretty big and successful and save a lot of houses in the Southeast.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's exciting to think about how the industry could really evolve into this more comprehensive approach where everything works together. It sounds like you're in a great position to be one of those leaders. Thanks for sharing that vision.
Sure.
So here's the next question. What do you think is one piece of advice you give to someone who's considering getting into the crawl space repair industry themselves?
So it's a hard industry. It's physically hard. The flip side of that is you'll get in really good shape. If you start out as a technician, you'll learn everything about crawl space, a lot about plumbing, heat and air, moisture, a lot about structural repairs. It's a very good foundation. No pun, I guess, no pun intended there. And just be prepared to work hard. There's a lot of upside in it. People haven't been paid well to this point in the industry, but I think that's changing, and it's going to be a very lucrative trade over the next 10 or 20 years, just because of the economics and that the houses need it and not many people want to do it. So anytime you're doing something that people have to preserve their structure and nobody else wants to do it, then it's going to end up being pretty lucrative. But yeah, just be prepared to put your head down and work hard and learn.
Yeah, that's really solid advice. And I love that perspective. It's definitely a field where if you're willing to do the hard work and learn those skills, you can really carve out a great niche for yourself. So that's awesome insight. So for the next question, let's talk a little bit about how you balance your work and personal life, especially running a business.
Yeah, that's a good question. So my wife and I both run the business, and I would say we've been in the industry for a long time, but this particular business is 3 years old. Balance is a little bit of a myth. I mean, if you want to really succeed, there's a quote that said, I don't remember who said it, but it's, if you spend 5 years doing what no one else will, you can live the rest of your life like other people don't get to. So we're in year 3, and our life revolves pretty hard around the business. We talk about it in the car. We talk about it at home. My daughter is probably going to grow up. She's 6. She's going to be a business expert and likely a crawl space expert. She already understands plumbing, and kind of talks plumbing terms. So, initially there's not a whole lot of balance. You have to be all in. And then I think the goal is, as the years go on, you bring other people in that share your vision, let them be part of that growth so that they can reap some benefits, and they end up, hopefully, if you treat them well, taking away some of that responsibility, and you get a little more freedom. I haven't hit the pot of gold yet, so I'm still working all the time. I will say, at least at this point, I'm not in the crawl space every day. I'm doing a lot of marketing and sales and office work, so it's a little easier on my body. But yeah, you've got to be willing to start out being unbalanced and get comfortable with that, and get over the fact that you deserve a certain amount of free time or leisure. If that's the case, then go get an hourly job. And there's a lot of great jobs out there that kind of give you that balance of life. But if you're taking on the responsibility of providing careers for others and being the business owner, then that balance isn't a thing starting out. You've got to be all in, and the balance will come later on if you sacrifice up front.
Yeah, that's a really honest and realistic take. And I think it's super valuable for people to hear. That idea that balance comes later after you put in that work is really key. And it's awesome that you and your wife are building that together.
Sure.
So the next question I have for you is, what's one thing you wish more people understood about the work you do that they might not realize?
I think most people know that the work is pretty difficult physically. No one wants to go work under a house. So clients will say things like, I don't know how you guys do this. I think what they may not realize before we come out to their house is how much of a technician the guys that do the work under these homes are. So the guys that are working under these homes at high level, they know more than engineers. They know more than most HVAC mechanics and most, service plumbers about the systems under that home. And all the time, I'll have engineers ask me a question or say, I'm not sure what the issue is here. And we solve a problem for them and they tell us, they're like, you guys are under there all day, every day, and you're actually fixing things and doing the work. So nobody knows more than you guys. So I think that the thing people don't often realize is how much knowledge and skill goes into not just being the owner of the company or the contractor, but just being a high-level technician that works under the home. These guys deserve a lot of respect. That's why we pay them. They make six figures, and they deserve every single penny of it. So that's the one thing I think people don't realize. They realize it once we do the job and leave. I think a lot of times they're kind of amazed at the work ethic of these guys that are doing the work underneath. But before we come out, I don't think they know how much of a technical trade crawl space work is.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And awesome to shine a light on just how skilled and knowledgeable those technicians really are. Is definitely more than just physical labor. It's a true technical for sharing that. All right, let's jump into the next question.
Sure.
What's one of the most common crawl space issues that homeowners run into?
So I would say the most common crawl space issue is moisture that results from humidity in our region. So we're in Hampton Roads, part of the southeastern United States, and the summers get super hot and humid. When that happens and you have a vented crawl space, so you don't have an encapsulated crawl space, then that hot air coming in condenses on the floor, the ductwork, the pipes, everything under there, because the items under the home are cooler. And when 95-degree humid air hits a 75-degree object, then water vapor releases onto that object. So all summer, it can be like a rainforest under these homes. And what that does is it can damage the wood, it causes mold and fungus, damages ductwork, causes plumbing corrosion, all types of things. So definitely humidity and the resulting moisture damage under the home is the most common issue.
Absolutely, that makes a ton of sense. It sounds like that humidity just turns the crawl space into a little tropical zone under the house. All right, let's roll right into the next one. So after you identify that moisture issue, what's the first step you usually recommend to fix it?
Yeah, so once we identify the moisture issue, it's pretty straightforward. If there's any damage, we're going to highlight that and let the owner know about it. But we're typically going to do a crawl space clean out because there's likely mold and fungus in the space. So we'll remove the insulation, dispose of that, do a deep wood cleaning, which is a super high concentrate peroxide based product that we also hand scrub. And then what we'll do is put new plastic down, seal the vents, put in a dehumidifier system, and maybe a new crawl space door, but make sure everything's sealed up and air sealed so that the hot, humid air can't affect that space going forward. In addition, if there is damage or moldy ductwork, we may replace that, or depending on the age of the house, do some plumbing work. So that's kind of the approach we're going to take to revitalize a space that hasn't had any moisture control in place and has issues and damage resulting from years or even decades of that occurring.
So it sounds like you're basically giving that crawl space a full-on makeover to keep it from turning back into a little rainforest under the house. All right, let's dive into the next piece. Once you've done all that work, how long does it typically last before a homeowner needs to do any kind of maintenance again?
Yeah, so ongoing, if you have a dehumidifier system and a sealed crawl space, you're going to want to service it every 6 to 12 months. You can stretch it out closer to 12, maybe for the first year, do a couple of visits. As the homeowner, you may want to peek your head down there every couple of months. But if you've put proper moisture control in place, things like plumbing, ductwork, electrical, they can last for decades and decades, 60, 70, 80 years, because the moisture is really what corrupts all of those materials. So once you have moisture control in place and you maintain that dehumidifier, think of it as that space being like a library where it's like a vault. But you just want to check it every couple of months, service the dehumidifier once or twice a year. And, other than that, you may need to clean it every 10 years. If you get a little dead insects, maybe a little rodent activity, or, you could have an issue. You could have flooding or a big plumbing leak happen, in which case it would be more extensive work. But assuming there's no major issues, then it's just kind of light servicing once or twice a year.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. It's like once you got it all set up, just a little regular check in here and there, and you basically keep it in great shape for decades. All right. Next up, once a homeowner has a fully encapsulated and maintained crawl space, what kind of benefits do they usually notice in terms of, say, energy efficiency or indoor air quality?
Yeah, good question. So the indoor air quality should improve significantly. Also, the home's going to be a lot more energy efficient, especially if you have ductwork in the crawl space. Because when the crawl space was vented, the super cold winter air or hot summer air would come and hug around that ductwork in the crawl space, making the AC and heat system run a lot more. When you have a sealed and encapsulated crawl space, that crawl space is going to be similar to the temperature of the inside of the homes, within 5 degrees typically, or if it's real hot or cold out, within 10 degrees. But it's a lot more energy efficient because you don't have that air intrusion. Also, your your water will arrive to your faucets at the right temperature a lot easier. So hot water can stay hot easier, cold water can stay cold depending on the season, and you don't get those extreme swings. So in terms of energy efficiency, it's probably the best thing that you can do for your home.
Yeah, that all adds up. It sounds like a win-win. You get better air quality, you get your home more comfortable, and you save on energy bills.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the calculations because I don't know if you can calculate it. You're dealing with a lot of variables there, but I would suspect, say you finance a crawl space renovation, it may come close or at least halfway to paying for itself. So, it's definitely a big energy saver.
Absolutely. And that makes total sense. Even if it's not an exact calculation, just knowing it can really offset those costs and kind of pay for itself over time is a huge benefit. All right, let's dive right into the next one. So, Robbie, now that we've covered kind of the energy efficiency piece, let me ask you this. What do homeowners usually say they notice first once the whole encapsulation is done? Like, what's the first thing they tell you they feel different in their house?
People honestly, they say that they sleep better. That their breathing issues, if they have any, feel a lot better. They don't notice any more smells. They notice that their HVAC system is running a little less, and that the just feeling in the home, because of not having that moisture or humid environment, that the home just feels better.
Absolutely. And that's got to be a pretty nice payout for them to feel that difference right away. So, Rory, when someone's thinking about whether to do this whole encapsulation, what's one piece of advice you'd give them before they get started?
I would just say understand why you're doing it. So don't just buy an expensive encapsulation from a company. Look at what the options are, whether you need a Cadillac high-end encapsulation or a hybrid encapsulation, which is less expensive. And honestly, what I prefer for most homes in the region because we have lower height crawl spaces. So kind of shop around and get a couple of opinions because unfortunately the industry is super heavy in commission sales and people try to sell you the most expensive thing they possibly can. So just do your homework, do some research, get a few opinions. That would be my advice.
That's really solid advice. Just knowing your options and not feeling pressured into the fanciest solution right out the gate definitely makes a lot of sense. So here's the next one. If someone's on the fence about doing this, what would you say to help them make the final decision?
So if you have a vented crawl space and you haven't had it encapsulated and sealed up, understand that humidity is just working to deteriorate everything under your home every single summer. So your plumbing is going to get corroded and give way faster. Your ductwork is going to be ruined a lot sooner. Your floors and structural wood under your home is going to sag, and it causes indoor air quality and mold under the home. And understand that if you're in the southeast region, which Hampton Roads is, that this is only a matter of time. It's not like, will this happen at my house? If you run AC inside your home in the summertime, then this is going to happen to one extent or another over time. And the longer it goes, the more expensive it's going to be to correct a lot of those problems. So running central air conditioning inside homes, creating cool, cold floors and crawl spaces in a hot, humid summer environment like we live in is going to wreak havoc on the underside of the home and all of the systems under the home. Sealing the crawl space and dehumidifying it solves all of those issues. So this isn't an opinion as to whether it's needed. With the amount that we run AC under homes in current times, this has to be done. They need to stop building homes with vented crawl spaces. Issues start occurring within the first year of brand new homes that cost homeowners lots of money. So the main thing to understand is this isn't like a nice to have or a maybe. This is something that has to be done at some point to preserve the structure and preserve the house without creating much greater expenses down the road.
Absolutely. That's a great way to frame it. It's really more of a necessity than a luxury in a
Yeah.
climate like that. What kind of budget range does someone expect if they're thinking about encapsulating their crawl space?
For smaller homes, you might be looking at $9,000 to $12,000. For big crawl spaces, maybe 12 to 15,000, depending on what's needed. Also, if there happens to be structural damage or anything, obviously that could drive the cost up. But that's a good ballpark of what you could expect.
Absolutely. That gives people a really good ballpark to start from. And of course, like you said, if there's any damage, it might nudge it up a bit, but yeah, that's a perfect range. All right, let's keep it rolling.
Sure.
How about this? For anyone who's maybe a little nervous about the disruption of the process, how long does the old encapsulation usually take?
Yeah, good question. So the encapsulation typically takes 2 days. If there's additional work to be done, it may be 3 or 4. And then if there happens to be super extensive repairs or whatever, then it might take a little longer. But for basic encapsulation, 2 days.
Perfect. That gives people a nice, realistic idea of the timeline. So, Robbie, can you bring down the difference between a hybrid encapsulation and a full encapsulation and when you might choose one over the other?
Yeah. So a full encapsulation is basically what you've seen over the years in the photos where there's really thick plastic wrapped up the foundation walls that's nailed to the walls and the foundation piers, and it looks awesome in the photos. A hybrid encapsulation has everything else the same, but it has a ground pinned vapor barrier versus being wrapped up the walls. Both packages have sealed vents, sealed doors, everything's air sealed. So in Hampton Roads, typically we prefer a hybrid encapsulation for a few reasons. Number one, it costs less. Number two, it's a lot easier to maintain going forward. And the reason it's easier to maintain and costs less is that most of the crawl spaces are fairly low. Like they don't have much clearance height. in Hampton Roads. So the labor to do the full wall and pier vapor barriers is super expensive because it's hard to move around. And it's going to be almost impossible to maintain the cleanliness going forward of these things. So if you had an issue or a leak or flooding going forward, you would have to rip it out because you can't service that thing very well in the crawl space. So there really are no trade-offs in terms of moisture or anything like that with either one. So the fact that the full encapsulation costs $7,000 or $8,000 more and really lacks any concrete benefits makes me lean towards the hybrid in most cases. That's what I would put in my own house or my mom's house if I was doing something. So a lot of people think that the vapor barrier is actually what stops the moisture, and it really has almost zero to do with stopping the moisture. Sealing the vents in the door is what stops hot, moist air from coming into the crawl space. And the vapor barrier is really a mat to crawl on and for the dehumidifier to sit on so that that dehumidifier doesn't suck up sand and dust. But contrary to what some of the crawl space companies 20 to 30 years ago that were starting into this industry thought, the moisture is not coming from the ground. The moisture is coming from air condensating on the joist and ductwork and everything that's above that vapor barrier. So that's why it's become way less important to spend the money on that extensive plastic wrap. Now, there are instances where I would do it. So if I was in Richmond or Raleigh, North Carolina, where we have some really high crawl spaces that we can walk in, then I may wrap it and even put some indoor-outdoor carpet down in the crawl space and keep kayaks in there or store stuff or, whatever. So as a rule of thumb, if I can easily go in there to clean the crawl space every year and store stuff in it, then I think spending the extra money on that higher end liner is worth it. If you can't go in the crawl space and you can't really clean it, then it's a waste of money. So those are the main difference between the hybrid and the full encapsulation is just to what extent and how much money are you spending on the crawl space liner. Also, if you do put a full encapsulation liner in, then you need a sump pump at a minimum, which adds, another $3,000 or $4,000 to the project. So at that point, you're looking at $10,000 more to do it correctly, to do that full encapsulation. And I just don't think the juice is anywhere near worth the squeeze for that. I don't. And I don't think it's going to be realistic to maintain in a crawl space with a low clearance height.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So it's really about choosing the approach that fits the space. And it really sounds like for a lot of homes in your area, that hybrid approach just makes more sense. And it's great that you can kind of tailor it to what people need. Let's dive into ductwork. What's the biggest issue you typically see that homeowners should watch out for?
Yeah, so ductwork in the crawl spaces a lot of times is as old as 50 or 60 years old, and no one's mentioned it to the homeowners that it's deteriorated and has issues, especially if the crawl space hasn't been encapsulated or went decades and decades without proper moisture control in place. Homeowners need to understand that that ductwork has fiberglass insulation around it, which is nothing more than like a towel wrapped around it. And when you have years of moisture issues, that insulation around that ductwork is mildewy and moldy, and has no more R value. So the old ductwork is losing a ton of energy, but it's also nasty. It's likely mildewy and moldy. And if you haven't had moisture control in place and the ductwork's older, over 20 or 25 years old, you probably need to replace the ductwork. And I know people don't want to hear this. They want to hear like, oh, we can patch the ductwork up and do the encapsulation. But if you think about it, if putting this moisture control in place, if one of the main reasons for it is that we want to improve the indoor air quality and health of the home, the crawl space ductwork is what the actual air that you breathe is pumped through. So if that is nasty, then everything else is in vain. So if you're going to encapsulate the crawl space and have older ductwork, then you need to just replace the ductwork. And the fact that the heat and air company that stopped by last didn't mention it, you have to understand that heat and air companies, they want to sell new units. They want to be able to take a $12,000 box pull an old one out and plop a new one down on a slab in your garage or outside your home. They are not interested in going under the home and replacing ductwork. They're not crawl space people. So they're never going to mention it, or some of them may, but they're not going to push the issue because they just want the mechanical unit work. That's what they specialize in. So when it comes to crawl space under the home, if it's old and you haven't had moisture control in place and you have mold and fungus on your wood, then your crawl space is probably nastier, or your ductwork is probably nastier than the wood. The ductwork is going to be the dirtiest thing in the crawl space, so don't overlook it just because other people don't want to do it. Know that it needs to be addressed if you haven't had moisture control in that space and you've had mold and fungus issues under the home.
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. It's really about making sure that everything in that airflow path is clean and up to date, not just the easy to replace unit. So when it comes to plumbing issues in a crawl space, what are some of the common problems you see and how do you usually tackle them?
Yeah, so when it comes to plumbing in a crawl space, the most common problems we see are old pipes, whether it be drain lines or water lines, which have corrosion and uh, are pretty much due to be replaced. And then sometimes we'll see the poly piping, like the polybutylene or Quest piping that was done from the 70s to 90s and is notorious for having joint leaks and cracking. So it would either be old copper and cast iron, or the Quest or poly piping that needs to be replaced or needs to be replaced soon. And the reason we want to point this out to people is that if they're going to encapsulate the crawl space and their pipes are super old, then it may make sense, just like the ductwork, to go ahead and replace them. Number one, because if they replace them after doing an encapsulation, then it's going to increase the cost and they're going to have to redo the vapor barrier in a lot of cases. But number two, if you're worried about home health and the pipes are 50, 60, 70 years old, then understand that there's just rust and corrosion on the interior lining of those pipes, and all of the water that's going to your faucet or to your shower head is dirty. That even if the city water is clean, the pipes that you have that are 50, 60, 70 years old are dirty. So you need to replace them when they're due to be replaced, so you don't have leaks occur and issues and water damage. Also, so you don't ruin an encapsulation. But thirdly, so that you have healthy water. So that's, I think, what people need to understand about the water lines under the home. And then the drain lines, they kind of tell you a little better when they're old. So if you're getting slow drains and, problems with drain clogging or leaks in your drain lines, then it's time to replace them. This stuff gets old and it's due for replacement at some point.
Absolutely. That really paints a clear picture. It's like if you're going to invest in making that space healthy, it just makes total sense that you'd want to do that all at once rather than having to come back and fix it later. So that's a great overview of the plumbing side of things. So when it comes to mold prevention, especially after you've done all this work in the crawl space, what are some general household tips you give to homeowners to keep everything mold free?
Yeah, good question. So let's back up a minute and talk a little bit about where mold comes from. So mold originates in spots that are moist. So mold has to have moist surfaces to breed. And whenever you see mold, then you know there's a moisture issue. So that can be condensation or water intrusion in the crawl space. That can be condensation in the bathroom, if you don't have good bathroom ventilation, or it can be as simple as like a leak behind a window. But mold is, when you see it like on your walls or floors or air vents, it's just the kind of canary in the coal mine or warning sign that you have a larger moisture issue. So to get rid of mold, obviously, if there's damage, you have to get rid of or clean those surfaces, but you have to stop the moisture, whether that be crawl space moisture or a leak or lack of attic insulation or even ductwork issues. You have to stop the moisture to stop the mold. So when we get called for a mold issue, first we're going to figure out where the moisture is coming from. And then if there are damaged materials like drywall, insulation, ductwork, we'll remove those, clean the materials that remain, like wood or tile or whatever, and then put back, whatever needs to be put back. Those are the steps to handling mold issues. And if you don't do them in that order, then the mold's just going to come back.
Absolutely. A moisture source first, and then the mold is just going to. So, Robbie, when it comes to structural repairs and crawl spaces, what are some of the typical issues you run into?
Yeah, so in terms of structural issues under the home, there's a handful of super common things that we see. Let's start with just damage. So we see rotted joists, rotted beams, termite damage to the wood, sill plates, subfloor issues. These are all wood members under the home, so it's part of the wood framing in the crawl space. Fixing it's not super complicated, it's labor intensive, but essentially you have to sister or replace damaged joists or beams and sill plates. Normally we can sister joists, which means we're just going to put a new joist up beside the old one to take the place of it. Or with beams and sill plate damage, a lot of times you have to replace those sections. Subfloor damage, you can sometimes, for smaller issues, support it from underneath, which a technique we call plating, which is less invasive, or you may need to rip up flooring and subflooring and repair it from the top. Those are kind of the main wood structural issues that we see in terms of damage. Another issue that we see is sagging wood. And signs of that are like cracking drywall, sloping floors that you see from inside the home. And even though there might not be real damage to the wood under the home, and typically what's causing sagging are decades of not having moisture control and having those seasonal moisture swings under the home. So the wood structure of the floor, those pieces of wood start cupping. So they'll have a curve or a bow to them, like warping of the wood. And it doesn't mean that they're not solid or that they're rotted. The wood fibers have just kind of weakened and transformed. And the way to remedy that is really to sister joist and get new straight pieces of wood under there. A lot of companies will recommend jacks and beams to remedy this, but when you think about it, you cannot press curved floor joists back straight. It's not a thing. You can't press up against weakened floor joists and make them straight just because you have a steel beam. So that's really one of the big misconceptions and improper repairs that we see. Really, those floor joists should be sistered so that you have new structure going forward. And then when you have your moisture control in place, that won't happen again. So it's not what some salespeople tell you that the spans of your joists or beams were too big to begin with. That has nothing to do with it. The sagging is due to years of seasonal moisture corrupting that wood. And the way to fix it is to get fresh wood in and moisture control in place so that it doesn't happen again. That steel beams and jacks have their place in a lot of great uses, but pressing up warped wood is not one of them. And it's just something that happens a ton because it's easy to sell and easy to install and high ticket items, but it's not the proper remedy for sagging in most cases.
Absolutely. That clears up a huge misconception. So really, it's about getting that new solid wood in there, controlling the moisture, and then you won't have that sagging again. Absolutely. Let's dig into that. So when it comes to, they definitely have their place for certain structure can be.
Yeah, so the real function of steel jacks and beams are to provide a load-bearing point where another point doesn't exist or has been corrupted, and you need a new beam there. So an example may be if you have damage under a bathroom and you can't get full-length floor joist in there from the middle beam to the side of the home because you have plumbing drain pipes and stuff in place. So rather than cutting out that whole plumbing system and repiping everything, it would make more sense to put a steel beam under the bathroom so that shorter sections of joists can be installed from that middle new beam to the original middle beam of the home and over to the side of the home. So kind of creating a middle bearing beam so that you can make those under bathroom repairs. That's one instance where steel jacks and beams come in handy. You're just adding a load bearing point so that you can sister joists and make repairs when you can't get a full 12 to 16 foot piece in there. Another example of when steel jacks and beams are important is if you have foundation wall where the joist go into the wall, or there's not a way to sister the joists to bear on what the original joists are bearing on, then you may put a beam in front of that foundation wall so that you can get sister joists. And the same thing, this is getting pretty technical, but the same thing with girder beams in the middle of the home. Sometimes you'll have where the floor joists were nailed directly into that beam, and if you have rot to that beam or to those joists, then you need to put a beam section right in front of that other beam, because you're not going to be able to get the new joist sistered to that beam that they're running into. So you need a replacement beam. That's really when jacks and piers come into play. And then you may use jacks to kind of support one heavy spot or something, or you may use them like under a kitchen island, something like that, to support a little bit of extra weight. But they're not for pressing up sagging floors. That's just not what they should be used for. And anyone that says that they are, it's just not going to work or hold up long term. So that's the answer to what steel jacks and beams are used for.
Absolutely. That's a great explanation. So really, it's all about using those steel jacks and beams for the right kind of load-bearing fixes, not for trying to straighten out work floors. And then on the flip side, when you're talking about helical piers or push piers, it's really just about using the right tool for the right job. And those helical or push piers, they're really about addressing that foundation settlement from the outside, whereas the jacks and beams are from those internal load-bearing points. So when we talk about helical piers and push piers, we're really getting into foundation stabilization. Basically, those are used when the home's foundation is starting to settle or shift and you need to stabilize it from below. So helical piers are kind of like giant screws that go onto the ground, and push piers are more like posts that get driven down. And they're really about making sure your foundation is on solid ground of the farther shift is. So yeah, let's break down a little bit of when you use those and how they work.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good explanation. So you're right. Helical piers are kind of like giant screws that go down, maybe 15 to even 30 or 40 feet into the ground. And push piers are kind of like cylinders that go down into the ground the same depth. And the goal of those is, if you have perimeter settling, in most cases, like the edges of your foundation on the outside of your home are settling because the land's giving way, then what you want to do is get piers in place to transfer that load down to a deeper soil strata. And normally, if this is happening and you need steel piers, then they're going to be spaced every 5 feet or so. And you basically dig a hole and put a bracket up against the original footing and drive with a machine, drive those piers down until you hit a refusal point, which might be a torque point or a PSI in the case of push piers. So they both serve the same function, and that's to create load-bearing points around the foundation where the ground has given way or let the foundation sink a little bit to get it down to a stable part of the earth. One question that comes up with steel piers and push piers is, when are they needed? And I see them over prescribed a lot, where you might have a little brick crack that's like a hairline crack, or what we call like a stair step crack on your bricks, and companies recommend $20,000 to $30,000 worth of piers. And what I'll tell you is, especially if you have a little bit older home, if you have foundation settling to the point where you need steel piers, when you look at that section where you have cracking, it's going to look like it's a super big deal. It's not going to be like a little thin crack in places. The rule of thumb is anything a quarter inch or less, especially if the home is an older home, likely does not need steel pier reinforcement. So in most cases that actually need it, there's major separation going on with those bricks or with those foundation cinder blocks, where kind of what I tell people is, if you showed it to somebody and they'd never seen it and you said, hey, here's what's going on, they would say, oh my goodness, that looks terrible. That's when you really need steel piers, not when you have like a little crack. So they get oversold and overprescribed a lot. Also, the need may be a little higher if you're, say, on the side of a hill. Then that's a little more alarming to me, when you start getting separation. But if you're on flat ground, older home, and a little bit of separation, you probably don't need steel piers. You could just seal that crack up and keep an eye on it. That's a little bit about when they are or aren't needed. And then let's talk about the difference between push piers and helical piers. On flat ground, they both serve the same function. When you're on the side of a hill, then helical piers, in my opinion, are going to be a little better because they do better at grabbing into the ground and holding up against side shear strength, since they do have those corkscrew helicals on them, whereas push piers would be a little better just for a vertical load and not a shear load. So other than that, on flat ground, they kind of serve the same.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic breakdown. So it really is about choosing the right type of peer for the situation. And it's good to know that at times people are maybe being told. I think we've got a pretty nice comprehensive overview there. So if there's anything else you need, just let me know. But I think we nailed it.
Okay, perfect. Let's wrap it up.
All right. Sounds good. I think we covered everything really well. It's been fun.
All right, Chris, I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
You got it, Robbie. My pleasure. Thanks for the chat. And you have an awesome one too. Take care.